Susan Athey, you've given a lecture tonight here at the Institute and yesterday at the University of Munich. Simple minds like me tend to think that robots will take over the world, but what you say is that's not true. They can only say if a picture shows a cat or a dog. Could you explain more?
Sure. So a lot of the recent innovations in machine learning have been about getting really, really good at solving fairly simple problems. And so what do I mean by a simple problem? I mean a problem where, for example, you're taking the pixels from an image and predicting what's more likely, is it a cat or a dog? One thing that's nice about those types of problems is that you can take a data set and not show it to your algorithm and have humans decide what are cats and dogs. And so then you can evaluate how well your statistical method did. And the ability to evaluate your performance and then incrementally improve is really crucial to the success of machine learning. What it's going to do is it's going to essentially test lots and lots of different possible models and find the one that works best. And that will work well if you can accurately assess the performance of your model. When you think about something more complicated, like playing chess or playing Go, still, what we're often doing is taking those problems and breaking them into simpler problems. And a computer can play lots of Go games against itself, and it can tell whether it won or lost. And so we can incrementally improve and get better and better and better at playing those. That's very different than something like building a credit model for loans, where you might take 3 years to learn if your credit model perfectly predicted who would pay back the loans. And so a lot of economic problems are problems where it's more difficult to assess the performance of your model, especially quickly. And so those problems are not as easily and immediately solved off the shelf with new machine learning methods.
So is machine learning and artificial intelligence then totally useless? You said they only come up with, one figure at the end. So that sounds like a hitchhiker's guide to the galaxy, where the answer of the computer after 1 million years of calculations is just 42.
Right. Well, so it turns out that actually you can get 80% of the way towards answering a lot of questions by breaking it into the simple parts. So a lot of times, if you're trying to decide whether a salesperson should call a customer and try to keep them from quitting your service, knowing whether that customer is likely to quit in the next month is very helpful, because if they're very unlikely to quit, then you really don't need to call them anyway. But on the other hand, if they're very, very likely to quit, they might quit no matter what you do. And so the salesperson doesn't need to call them. So a simple model of just who is likely to quit can help you stop calling some people who you don't need to call. But you need to do more to figure out, well, exactly who should I call? Who are the people for whom making a phone call will actually change the outcome? And that's a causal effect or a treatment effect. And so that's actually what some of my research and other researchers are working on now, are ways to adapt machine learning to be able to help people really make decisions. Who should get the drug? Who should get the phone call? Who should I show the ad to?
And you want to apply that to a whole bunch of economic situations.
Exactly. I think economics is very much about asking what-if questions. What would happen if I changed the price? What would happen if I raised the minimum wage? And so what we're working on is adapting the machine learning methods, which were designed to solve simple problems, and help them be more effective answering some of these more complicated problems.
Some of the research you've been doing, you said yesterday, was on the news system in the United States. Can you elaborate a bit?
Yeah, I've been looking at what the effect is of aggregators and intermediaries.
What is that? Who is that?
On what people read. So an intermediary gets in between the user and their news. So the Google search engine or the Google News aggregator are examples of intermediaries. Facebook and Twitter are also important intermediaries. And so what we do is we try to compare what people read when they try to find things directly with what they read when they go through intermediaries. And so one of the things we find is that the presence of aggregators and intermediaries makes people read many more small outlets that would be hard to find, if you weren't looking for them. You might not even know about them. But these aggregators and intermediaries make it easier for you to find these small news sources. That can be good or bad. The small news sources might provide independent research or a diversity of opinions, but it's also the case that most fake news or misleading news comes from small or less known sources. There are a few large sources that are often fake, but mostly they're coming from small sites. And so what we find is the main way that people get to those fake sites is through things like Facebook.
Okay, so does that mean that Facebook has to change their policy?
Well, it's a hard question, because Facebook as a platform was created for people to share with their friends. So it's not clear that people want Facebook to stop me from sharing something I think is interesting with my friends. So I think Facebook is actually actively working to try to help navigate this problem. Maybe it's providing a link to a source that can verify whether the news is true or false. It can rank more highly news from trusted sources. But ultimately, I don't think Facebook can or should, prevent us from communicating with each other.
You also said that right-wing people in the United States read more fake news than left-wing or left-center or right-center people. How did you find that out?
So I looked at a data set of news browsing during the US election. And so when you look at who was reading what, of course, that is determined both by what people want to read as well as what news is available. And so in this election, there was just a lot more fake news created on the right than on the left. So we saw both right and left fake news, and we found people of both extremes reading fake news. But there was just a lot more fake news on the right, and it was so mostly a right-wing phenomenon. We also found relationships with demographics. So the people who tended to read fake news were older, heavy social media and blog readers.
That is Twitter or?
Yeah, Twitter or Facebook. They tended to be more white and less educated. And so those demographics also correlate with being more right-wing. So it may be that a certain demographic is more susceptible to fake news, and that might be one of the reasons that fake news was created to serve that demographic.
Thank you very much.